Hey everyone, I'm Space Robot Arm. I'm a retro streamer on Twitch, and one thing that makes playing these older games extra special is the tactile feeling of being able to plug in an original cartridge into my actual NES or Super NES or Genesis and have that direct video from the real console be part of my stream. It's taken a bit of effort and it's been a bit of a journey to get to the point of being able to really understand how to get a really nice high quality capture for streaming, and I would like to take a few minutes to share with you all some basic tips that can really improve the look of your retro streams. Now, one thing that a lot of people will say about original hardware streaming is that it can get really expensive. And while that is true, there's a lot that you can do with basic, cheap stuff. So I do have a RetroTink 5X and a modded SNES Junior and RGB cables and all that. I'm a firm believer that it's not about spending lots and lots of money on fancy equipment, but rather understanding the tools that you do have and knowing how to make the most with them. So in this video, I'm going to talk about three things: aspect ratio, scaling, and post-processing. And I think with these basic tips that I'm going to give, you can dramatically improve the look of your retro stream. So to start off, aspect ratio. So our modern flat panel HD TVs usually have an aspect ratio of 16:9, and that number is the ratio of the width of the screen to the height. Back in the days up until the mid-2000s, certainly up through the N64 and PS1 era, most games were designed for a 4:3 CRT screen. Now, with my RetroTink set to just output 480p, I mean, it doesn't know what the resolution is, I guess, so it's automatically assuming that it's 1920 by 1080, a like full HD 16:9 resolution. And you can see on the screen, everything is stretched out. This is certainly not the way Secret of Mana was meant to be seen. And let me say that fixing the aspect ratio is the biggest bang for your buck that you can get in terms of tweaking the look of your retro capture. What I'm gonna do is double click my source in OBS, go down to resolution/FPS type, and I'm gonna change it from device default to custom, and then the custom resolution that I'm gonna choose is gonna be 1280 by 960. That's just the first one that I recognize as a 4:3 aspect ratio. And now we have something that's closer to a square and not all stretched out, and this is the way that this game was originally designed to be seen. Yeah, we can resize the window and fill up the screen to match whatever overlay you have. But this is a good segue into the next topic, which is scaling. So it's really convenient that OBS has the ability to make things whatever size you want, but if you really want the cleanest possible signal, what I recommend you do is make sure that the size that you set this window to is an integer scale of the original resolution. So most gaming consoles up through N64 and PS1 output a resolution called 240p. That's 240 rows of pixels. The model numbers of the RetroTinks, 2X and 5X, those numbers mean how many times is the integer scale for that original 240p image. So the 2X will always output a 480p image. The 960 was the vertical resolution that we chose when we set the aspect ratio, right? Okay, but I've resized this window a ton, and I don't know where the original aspect ratio is anymore. So to get back to that pure integer scale, what we can do is right-click the source, go to Transform, and then Reset Transform. And now here it is in 1280 by 960, perfect 4:3 integer scaled aspect ratio. So this is a 4x of the original 240p. And so why is the integer scale important? Well, imagine you have an original image that has one row of black pixels. With our 4x scale, now you've got 4 rows of black pixels even. But what if you had a 2.5 times scale, so non-integer? There have to be an algorithm that interpolates rows of pixels. You're either going to double up on an extra row of black pixels that's going to be a little bit off and the image is going to look a little wonky, or you're going to remove one of those rows of pixels and add whatever the next row is supposed to be. And it's just, there's going to be something off about it. So the RetroTink 5X is an amazing device, there's no doubt about it, but all the features that it has are really more for playing games on a modern TV, not so much for capturing and streaming, because actually OBS can do a lot of the things that the 5X does. I'm going to double click on the source, and I'm going to change the resolution. Let's see, so instead of 1280 by 960, it would be 1600 by 1200. So let's try to set the resolution to exactly that and see what it looks like. Okay, so now this window is bigger than our 1920 by 1080 screen, and that's, that is what the actual RetroTink 5X does as well. It actually crops the top and the bottom of the image. The reason that we can do that with these older games is that for CRT TVs, the edge of the screen is known as the overscan area. There's lots of graphical stuff in these games that was never designed to be seen by the player. That's the stuff that exists in overscan. That's why the 5X scaling that the RetroTink 5X does is really awesome, actually, because it captures that authenticity of playing on a CRT. So when I'm streaming retro games, I do use the 5X overscan mode with the RetroTink, and it's exactly this image that we just did using in OBS without using the fancier RetroTink 5X options. So you can do what the 5X can do with any device that gets you into OBS. So the last thing I want to talk about is post-processing. And what I mean by post-processing are things like scanline filters or other kind of filters that you might want to apply to the image. The first one I want to just briefly touch on is smoothing. There have been a lot of games re-released that apply some what's called a smoothing filter to the original pixel art. And RetroTinks have this as an option, but I would really recommend against doing this. What this is basically doing is getting rid of the sharp edges of pixels and making things round. And it doesn't make as big of a difference when we're playing in composite video here, you can see, but if we were playing in RGB, there would be a big difference. And you can see that the numbers down in the bottom of the screen don't really look quite right. They don't look like pixel art anymore. You could probably see for some of the characters too. I will say that there's no wrong way to play games, of course. Do the thing that looks best to you personally, but I do strongly believe most people that are looking for retro gaming content on Twitch will not appreciate the smoothing filter. you know, in my opinion, it does a disservice to the original artwork of the game. The other post-processing option that is that I actually see a bit more on Twitch, and again, this stuff is up to your personal preference ultimately, but the other one is the scan lines. So RetroTink 5X has these amazing, beautiful scan line options that really do replicate the look of a CRT when you're playing, especially when you're playing it on your HD TV, right? The only problem with using these while streaming is that Twitch is going to have its own compression and decompression that happens, and you never know if your viewers are going to be watching at your full streaming resolution. And if they aren't, they're going to experience the effects of non-integer scaling. I mean, I still recommend that you do integer scaling just to make to give yourself the best possibility of getting a crystal clear image over to the other side. But if your viewers aren't seeing an integer scaled image, especially with scan lines, well, that's where that example of a row of all black pixels is literally going to show up. And there's going to be weird effects called aliasing, where, yeah, it's going to double up some of those rows of black pixels, and it's going to get rid of others. And it probably won't look good for everyone watching. And in my stream, I actually have a channel point redemption to turn on scan lines for a limited time. The reason I have that is because I do really appreciate the way that they look. You know, I think it is an authentic representation of what playing these games on a CRT was like. The problem is that it doesn't always look good for everybody depending on how they're watching the stream. So that's why I chose to have it be a channel point redemption that is only active for a limited time. And if you want to take that idea, feel free. Run with it. Okay, so let's turn off the scan lines. Let's get back to what I think is the best thing you can do with a cheap scaling device and OBS and composite video with an original SNES, and that would be to look like this. Okay, so to summarize, the three things that we talked about were aspect ratio, scaling, and post-processing. With aspect ratio, you really want to make sure that your game is presented in 4:3 if it's a 4:3 game. I mean, if you're playing like a PS3 or Xbox 360 or later, chances are there's a 16:9 mode built into that game. But if you're playing anything earlier, it's probably 4:3. For scaling, you always want to stick to an integer multiple of the original 240p image or 480p image if it's coming in through a scaling device. And then for post-processing, err on the side of not, because, you know, the smoothing filters, most people aren't looking for something like that when they're looking for retro content. And the scan lines, while they can look very good if you're seeing the full resolution of the image, if the image that your viewer is seeing is scaled in any way, it could really mess up the experience. So I hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments. Please feel free to come into my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/spacerobotarm. I stream Mondays and Thursdays from 8 p.m. to about midnight. And let me know if there are any specific topics you'd like me to talk about in the future in regards to streaming from original retro game hardware. Thanks. Bye.